Hi everybody, welcome back. Welcome to video 2 of the Fikes Tips and Tricks series. And I mentioned this in the first video, but just to reiterate, the purpose of these videos really is you've got all the readings. You've got the e-textbook and everything that you're already reading that gives you plenty of advice and plenty of tips and frameworks and theories and everything else. But these videos are really my chance to give you some additional insight and some things that I think are particularly important related to the topics that we're going to be focused on for the class. And I like to think about these different topics as building blocks for the speech making process. So you'll see a number of these videos. And so for this second one, I want to focus on the very first, and it's put as number 1 for a reason. It's what I would argue is the most important factor in the speech making process, and that's a key word, is process, and that's audience. One of my favorite professors, in fact, Dr. Steve Beebe, who is the primary author for your textbook, used to always tell us in class, it was particularly related to the training context, is it's all about their needs. So what are their needs? What are their needs? What are they interested in? Where do they come from? What would benefit them? And that same thing goes for the public speaking context. So the very first video focuses on audience, specifically audience analysis. And what I want us to think about is, one of my favorite quotes about communication is that it is the process of adjusting ideas to people and people to ideas. So adjusting ideas to people and people to ideas. And audience analysis is at the very center of that. So what I want you to think about is whenever you're trying to come up with your speech topic, with how to organize your speech, with what visual aids to use, what videos, whatever it is who's in the audience? What are their positions on various things? What are they likely to be interested in? Where do they come from? What groups do they belong to? And figure out how you can tailor your speech to that particular audience. It's quite possible that you give the very same speech very differently depending on the audience. So that's a critical piece. So when you're thinking about your speeches for this class, for instance, be thinking about, okay, who's your audience? Well, they're college students. So what kind of information, whether it's informative, persuasive, whatever, would benefit college students? What are their demographics? What are their likely career fields that they'll go into? How likely are they to be in favor of or in opposition to my position if it's a persuasive speech or whatever? The great thing about audience analysis is it not only helps you as a speaker be more effective because you can tailor your message. We may not make this connection, but I would argue that thinking about your audience is one of the best ways to deal with speech anxiety. When I go give talks, one of the things that I do, in addition to teaching full-time, is I do quite a few training workshops for local corporations. And one of the things that I think about, no matter what, and I'm always a little nervous before that because I'm thinking about, man, I'm going to be there for an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, however long the workshop is. So I get a little bit anxious thinking about that. One of the main ways that I deal with that is I think about that audience, and I answer the number one question, which is, what's in it for me? Or in that case, what's in it for the audience, right? So what's one of the first things that you'll do in the introduction of a speech is you'll explicitly answer that, what's in it for the audience. But as a frame of reference for you, thinking about audience is one of the best ways to help yourself deal with anxiety, speech anxiety. Ultimately, audience analysis helps, and adapting to an audience helps create identification and connection between the speaker and the audience. You have something that you're interested in. The audience has their own interests and positions, and the extent to which you come together in that is how you can reach an audience, how you can keep them engaged, how you can persuade them. It's fundamentally how, if you sit in front of an interviewer at a job, that's how you get the job. It's by making that connection, demonstrating fit. So you'll read a lot about that in the textbook as far as how to some of the specific questions. But I wanted to just give a few comments about audience analysis. It's all about creating connection. It's about figuring out what's in their inbox. What are they most likely to be interested in, and then trying to build that connection. So always be thinking of the audience first and how your information is going to benefit you, benefit them, and then that's where your content should focus on. So in the next video series, we're going to focus on how to prep for a speech, how to pick topics, and so that's where we'll turn our attention next, and I'll see you then. Last thing I want to mention when you're thinking about how to analyze your audience, you can explicitly ask questions of the audience, right? And so one of the things that you'll notice in the class, if you look in Blackboard, is one of the pre-course activities was to tell the class a little bit about yourself. So that's a really easy, simple way to do an audience analysis is read through those postings, figure out just like in an in-person class, you introduce yourself the first day. That's data you can use for audience analysis. So let me just encourage you to go back and read those very closely with that in mind as you're thinking about how to analyze your audience. And then the first speech in this class is the introductory speeches, and you'll get to hear more about each other. So really use that data, that information, to help you tailor to your audience. It helps you reduce your anxiety, and it makes it more likely that you'll connect with the audience. So again, the next video is all about preparation and how to pick topics that are going to be interesting to the audience. So I'll see you then.